Shabbat Shalom and welcome. This is Torah Study for Shabbos. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein here in beautiful, warm, sunny Southern California, joined as always by my teacher and dear friend, Rabbi Mark Gelman of Florida and Melville, New York. Shabbat Shalom, Mark.
Shabbat shalom, my dear friend.
And not just Shabbat Shalom, but this coming week, Sunday night, begins the Jewish festival of Shavuot. Originally called the Feast of Weeks in the Bible, that's what Shavuot means, 7 weeks from the beginning of Passover. It was the holiday of first fruits in the agricultural life of the Torah, and even in some wonderful communities here and in Israel, gathering first fruits is part of the custom. One of the things that we do is for many years, we've done a wonderful celebration of all the new babies that were born this year,
Oh,
which is a
nice.
lovely thing to do. And the day school kids come to synagogue and with flower garlands in their hair, and they bring baskets of food for the food bank, indicating first fruits as we used to do in the ancient temple. But of course, the rabbinic tradition remade it. And the rabbinic tradition decided this is not just the holiday of first fruits, but the greatest, as it were, bounty ever given the Jewish people. This is the day that we celebrate the giving of Torah on Mount Sinai. And as is the custom in all of our holidays, it's not enough just to commemorate something. We actually have to live it and do it. So on Passover, we eat what our ancestors ate. And on Sukkot, we live as our ancestors lived. And on this holiday, we're going to learn like our ancestors learned. And on Sunday night, we're going to stay up late into the wee hours learning Torah. So this is a holiday celebrating the giving of Torah. Torah, in its broadest sense, of course, is not just the five books of Moses or the Ten Commandments, but Torah is the collective wisdom, the collective truth that is embraced by the Jewish people. And in this sense, it is the bookend to Passover. Passover was the holiday of freedom from bondage, what the great philosopher Isaiah Berlin would call negative freedom or freedom from. And Shavuot is freedom to, freedom that gives us a vision of what to do with our freedom, that we may be a covenanted people, that we may create the just society, the sacred people, and do God's blessings in the world. And that becomes the great mission and the great moral truth of the Jewish people. So, Mark, this holiday represents a really interesting and in many ways deeply troubling question for us. If you went on the street in your neighborhood or mine and asked a dozen Jews to come over and ask them this question, what is it deeply that your Jewishness consists of? I would suspect that for most of them, they would say belonging. I feel like I belong to the Jewish people. I feel like this is my people. I celebrate my people. I celebrate Israel as a symbol and representation, homeland of my people. I participate in holidays and often do rituals as a way of affirming my belonging to my people. Identity consists of belonging. But for most of Jewish history, it wasn't only belonging. Certainly that was a piece of it. It was also something else. And for certain heroes, for example, Maimonides, who is a hero for both of us, Judaism was truth. It wasn't belonging, it was believing. It was knowing that we as a Jewish people had arrived at certain truths, whether they were handed down from heaven or discovered in the course of our lives together and embraced by our people. We represent truth. And the mission of our Jewish people is not simply to survive and to thrive, but really to carry forward that truth into the world. So, Rabbi Gelman, which is it? Are we a people of belonging or a people of believing? Are we a people of peoplehood, of tribal loyalty, national loyalty, or a people who embrace a moral vision of the world and a moral mission for ourselves?
Okay, the way I would go to the bottom line on this is, which is the bottom line of my life, is we are a tribe that cannot survive without a set of beliefs. We're definitely a tribe. And what is the definition of a tribe? It's blood.
Hmm.
So if you ask, how do you belong to this group? How do you become a Jew? The answer is blood. Your mother has to be Jewish. there's some futzing around with that my movement did, which I'm not thrilled about, and it's very complicated. But basically, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. And the point of that is that it's blood. You don't have to believe anything. You can be the worst person on earth, but if your mother was Jewish, you're Jewish. You're in the tribe. And you occasionally hear people in casual conversation talk about the tribe. MOT is the acronym, a member of the tribe. So we're definite, and so we're definitely a tribe because what it takes to become a part of us, becoming part of the Jewish people, is blood. However, we are the only religion, and I've studied this to some degree, we are the only religion in the world, Ed, that has a dual entry system. You can become a Jew by blood, or you can become a Jew by converting to be Jewish, which is belief. So, what does that mean? For example, why is that really true? No other religion, yeah, no other religion has both. In Christianity, you can be from any ethnic group in the world. If you believe Jesus came to earth and died and was resurrected as your savior, you're a Christian. And Muslims, same thing. The biggest Muslim country in the world isn't an Arab country, it's Malaysia, it's Indonesia. So you could become a Muslim just by saying you believe in the Shahada, which is like their Shema. It says, I believe that Allah is God and Muhammad was his prophet. If you say that, you are a Muslim. So, of all the religions in the world, and of course, Buddhism is just belief. In fact, it's just a philosophy. So it's not a tribe at all. So if you look all over the world, we are the only tribe that allows people to join. And that created an internal tension within us. Because being a tribe is radically different than believing something and being part of a religion. Radically different. And we've fought about these things. In the Russian Revolution, the Jews were organized like White Russians, Bolsheviks, Mensheviks. They were organized in separate groups just by their ethnic identity. They weren't organized by their beliefs. So the tension between being a member of a tribe, which doesn't require anything from you, and being part of a religion, which requires everything from you, is dramatic. It's just dramatic. And I'll just end with one story. I'm counseling, as I often did, a potential intermarried couple. And the Christian woman says to her Jewish fiance, look, I'm willing to convert to be Jewish, but I want to talk about something with Rabbi Gelman and you. And that is, why does this matter to you?
Mm.
I have never seen you go to synagogue. You don't own any Jewish books. You don't keep kosher. You do nothing that's Jewish. So, but you want me to leave my religion, which I'm willing to do because I love you, but you want me to leave my religion to become part of what you are, but I don't even know what that means because you don't do anything. You don't do anything Jewish. And so he looked at her and he said, you're right, I don't. But I feel in my soul, I feel inside of me, connected to the Jewish people so strongly that I couldn't marry a non-Jewish person. I need to support my tribe, my people. And unless I'm married to a woman who wants to also support my tribe and my people, I can't marry you. He said it straight.
How does he express that idea of supporting my tribe? How does he identify actively identify if he doesn't do Jewish things? How
The
does he
close-
think he, how
That's
does
a
he
great
thinks he
question.
how does he think he does it? That's what I'm
Right.
asking.
The closest I could get out of him
Yeah.
was baseball and football.
Really?
In other words, this is his team.
Oh, okay.
In other words, you grow up, and part of what it is to grow up in his world is you have a team. You have your football team, you have your baseball team, basketball team, and that is an identity for you. And the same is true about being Jewish for him. Being Jewish is part of his team.
But my team, if I root for, say, the Lakers, I know where they stand vis-a-vis other teams. I know what their record is. I know who the players are on the floor. I know I wear their colors. I fly a flag when they're in the playoffs. It doesn't bother him that he doesn't do any of this stuff at all.
Well, the missing link,
I'm just naively asking this because
no, no,
I've had
these
that
are
same conversation with dozens of people, of course.
right. It's a wonderful question. The missing link, Ed, as you know, is Israel. So for him, what it means to be part of the tribe means you support Israel.
Hmm.
And that gives him a sense of identity, acceptance, inclusion that he doesn't feel by being an American,
Hmm.
which was it's another discussion, but exactly the dynamic that I went through along with other guys in the 60s during the civil rights movement in America and the Six-Day War in Israel. We were pulled like lemmings over a cliff. We were pulled in the direction of Israel because
Hmm.
America just couldn't inspire us. So the truth of the matter is Israel fills in a piece of it, but
Yeah.
another part of it is, and this is hard for our LA students to understand, or I think we have a student in Afghanistan. It's hard to understand. In New York, to be Jewish is is like being Catholic in Boston. It's like
In
being
Rome.
Protestant in Newport.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the place of our tribe. And part of it, part of tribal Jewish identity is the food, bagels and lox and rye bread and corned beef. And part of it is the environment of New York City. Part of it was Yiddish and Yiddish culture, though that's faded out. And so now the question is, with the children, let's say, of this intermarried couple, who are going to get zero Jewish understanding from their mother and an incoherent Jewish understanding from their father, what hope do we have?
That's a question.
What does the Jewish tribe look like today? We know what the Jewish religion looks like today. You can do the Orthodox, Chabad, Orthodox, modern Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionists. There's incredible nuance in the religious part of the Jewish identity.
Hmm.
Judaism as belief is clear. You have different choices, but it's clear. What Judaism as an ethnic group, as a peoplehood is totally confused. And now, with Israel having bad public relations, it has an impact on Jewish identity in America. Because if Israel was filling your gap of Jewish peoplehood, and all of a sudden Israel is doing things in the war that make you cringe, what are you going to do? How are you going to establish your identity?
Hmm.
And that all leads me to my final comment, which is the only Judaizing force in the world is the synagogue.
Hmm.
It's the only place you can make Jews. You can't make Jews in the Second Avenue Yiddish Theater, though once upon a time we thought we could. You can't make Jews in the Arbeiter Ring and in the left wing Jewish communist papers, though once upon a time we thought we could. The only way to make Jews is to get Jews to feel that they stood at Sinai this week
Hmm.
and that God has something about their destiny that implicates them and that they need to grasp it and they need to internalize it and they need to become proud Jews who stood at Sinai.
Hmm.
That's what we need now. Jewish ethnic identity is nearly dead. It's a joke on TV shows and it's not sustaining itself.
Hmm.
Jewish religious identity, thanks to you and a very few other phenomenal American rabbis, it still is fighting, it's still punching. And I believe it will continue and will reinvigorate the soul of American Jews because Israel was never ever really an effective or complete surrogate for your Jewish identity in America. Anyway, that's what I have to say.
It's so many wonderful ideas. So my dear friend Rabbi Daniel Hartman, whom I study with in the summertime, and who's a very very insightful teacher of Judaism,
Yep.
um, he has this concept which mirrors your idea. He says there are Genesis Jews and Exodus Jews. The book of Genesis, as you said in the 12th chapter of Genesis, God calls Abraham and establishes the tribe. And you are a member of the tribe no matter what you do, whether you identify or don't identify, whether you worship God or don't worship God, you are a member of the tribe. And we maintain a sense of tribal identity, tribal affiliation. And as you mentioned, that wonderful story, it may be the last piece of Jewishness to go once we've assimilated into America. The happy story, and I'll call it a happy story, that you mentioned, where he says to her, I need you to convert because I can't marry a non-Jew because this Jewishness is so deep inside of me. I can't imagine living with someone who doesn't share it with me, right? That's the last thing to do. There's of course there's a sad side to that, or rather a dark side, is when she converts and then she'll come to you and say, Mark, I don't understand what happened. We go to the Passover Seder. I'm the only one at the Passover Seder who can read the Hebrew parts of the Haggadah because you taught me that. I'm the only one who's actually reads the story of the Exodus in the Bible because you
Yep.
taught me that. I'm the only one who knows the true story and the midrashim, the traditions of Passover, because you taught me that. But my mother-in-law does not consider me fully Jewish because I can't make matzah balls the way that she does. And the girl will cry to you, what happened? What's wrong with me? This idea that once you're an outsider, and there's words for this, once you're a shiksa, once you're an outsider, you're never going to be in. And she'll cry to you because that ethnic identity sometimes becomes a barrier instead of a hug, instead of an embrace. And that's
Correct.
that's the
And that
downside of it. That's the dark side of it.
that's brilliant and important that you raised that because it's the reason why the only appropriate Judaizing force is the synagogue because it doesn't have a dark side.
Yeah,
It doesn't have the dark side that Jewish ethnic identity does.
right.
Jewish ethnic identity, tribal identity, and this isn't Jewish, by the way. This is any group that doesn't allow outsiders in. There's a lot of romanticism, for example, about the first peoples in America. The Sioux Indians, the Cherokees. You're aware, let's say you decide you love the Cherokee traditions, you want to become a Cherokee Indian. You can't do that.
Mm.
There's no way to convert to be a Cherokee. I once joked with a First Peoples friend of mine. I said, look, I got the name all picked out. I'll be Prince Whitefish. And
A Jewish Indian, right.
yeah, you need a few Jewish Indians. So there's no way to join. another example is Hinduism. Both it is absolutely impossible to convert to be a Hindu.
Really?
That's a striking thing most people don't understand, but it's true. And the reason is that when you are a Hindu, they have within their ethnic group, as almost all religions do, we have it with the priesthood, the Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. The Hindus, of course, have it with the Varnas. That's what it's called. The Varnas are the different stages. The Kshatriyas, the shopkeepers, the Sudras, the untouchables, and the Brahmins, the high level princes and kings. And if you converted to be a Hindu, what caste would you go into? So I'll pick Brahmin, thank you very much. So you can't convert to be a Hindu, and you can't convert to be a Cherokee Indian, and you can't convert to any ethnic group. And that's as bigoted as this woman's this mother-in-law is about the matzo ball soup.
Right.
She has a point. She has a point. Which,
But the felicitous answer to your problem is that the guy's going to marry this woman who's going to spend 6 months to a year studying with Rabbi Gelman,
yes,
and she's going to light Shabbos candles, and
yes.
she's going to make sure there's Kiddush cup on the table, and she's going to decorate the house for Hanukkah and make latkes, and she's going to force him to have a seder. And this boy is going to discover the other side of Judaism, whether he likes it or not, because she's going to fall in love with it because she's going to say,
Correct.
the faith that I was raised in never made much sense to me, and I wasn't allowed to ask questions. And you people celebrate questions. So the other kind of Judaism, Genesis Judaism, says Hartman, is that Judaism. It's the unconditional welcome into the tribe. You're not welcome into the tribe because you're any kind of person. You're just welcome into the tribe because that's the tribe. Exodus Judaism begins with a new word. The word in Hebrew is im, which means if. If you observe my commandments, and if you follow my ways, and if you build the just society, and if you live the holy life,
Then
then
I will.
I will be your God and you will be my people. And Exodus Judaism demands something of us. And the sociological paradox is that you can convert to a religion, a faith, but you can't convert to an ethnicity, as you said. And
Yeah.
we are both, and we come together. And so this person entering might not feel totally at home with us because we always look askance at outsiders, not always, but we often look askance at outsiders, even though she becomes more practicing than the insiders. And she
Right.
becomes a practicing insider. And that becomes one of the tensions and paradoxes within the Jew. It's in the Bible, by the way, because there's the book of Ruth, which is about accepting the outsider. And Ruth is a Moabite, which makes her an uber outsider. And then there's the book of Ezra. And the book of Ezra says, we don't welcome outsiders, get rid of them. And it's right in the Tanakh, it's right in the Bible itself. But now here's the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that we're a fusion of the two.
Yes.
That is, that's why what I asked you a moment ago. We welcome you as part of the tribe, and we celebrate our tribalism. But our tribalism has to be expressed in something. Simply saying I feel Jewish, doesn't cut it, right? Now the
Well,
fact is
that's
that
where we're at right
I
now.
know, I know, I know. The Jewish Federation of Los Angeles did a survey. It's kind of embarrassing. They did a survey and they asked people, like, what are the cultural markers of your Jewishness? And you know what was number one? Number
No.
one was I eat in Jewish restaurants.
Oh my
I'm
God,
not
no.
making that up.
Oh
Deli.
God, no.
That's why New York, because it has much better delis than any place on earth,
And
right?
even there, that's one of the statistics used to describe the death of the Jewish peoplehood. There used to be hundreds of delis in Manhattan. Now there's only a couple.
Right, right. Unless you want to count Chinese restaurants as Jewish restaurants or sushi bars as restaurants.
I do,
Right,
absolutely.
but the idea, so the Pew study says that 89% of Jews feel proud to be Jewish. That's the most The most interesting thing is that no matter what we are, there's a sense of pride in identity and in tribal affiliation, but of observance of religious ritual, affiliation with community, charitable support of the community or even of Israel is much lower on the scale than the second thing, by the way, the second most powerful thing, which is kind of sad, is I remember the Holocaust.
Yes, that's true.
So the legacy of destruction and of annihilation remains with us as a motivator of or an indicator of identity.
Yeah, but that doesn't work because anti-Jew hating is never a reason for Jewish pride.
Well, it's anti-Semitism doesn't add up to Judaism.
Correct.
So Shavuos comes along and it says to us, in addition to your sense of tribal identity and the menu at the deli, I want you to open a book. The idea that God enters the world in a book because we are a people that maintains a truth. And our truth is in the way that we look at the world, the way that we look at humanity, the way that we look at the good life that a human being might live. These are profound indicators of Jewish identity. These are what Jewish is about. Maimonides is the most extreme example of this because he had no truck whatsoever, no patience whatsoever for ethnic identity. For him, it was all about truth.
13 principles.
That's why he came up early in his career. He wrote that in his commentary to the Mishnah, 13 principles of belief. And he said, if you ignore any of these, then you're not in the game. You're not in the Jewish game. But the whole idea that you could say, here are the principal beliefs. Unfortunately, what's happened is that many Jews then identified with Mendelssohn's idea, Moses Mendelssohn's idea, we have no dogma, only legislation. And it's not true. You can't have legislation without dogma. The mitzvot, the indicators of our identity, the things that we do as Jews, all come with narrative. And narrative carries values. And narrative carries a perspective on the world. And this is what when you and I kvetch about the state of the Jewish world, this is what we miss. This is what
Without a doubt.
we're afraid that Jews are losing.
We are losing, but and one of the reasons is I think if you dig down a little deeper into the procedures followed by American rabbis in converting people to Judaism, there's almost no attention to the only issue that matters, which is do you believe X, Y, and Z? You know, it's just okay, you want to be Jewish, booga booga booga, you're Jewish. It should be, hey, what does this mean to you? What does it mean to you to be Jewish?
Mm.
And is that a reason for you to give up your other religious life and believe what Jews believe? So the reason I'm a Maimonidean is that I don't believe a religion that has nothing to do with the truth matters. I don't believe that ethnic religions like Hinduism can avoid the dark side. I think,
And they don't last. I mean,
well,
one of
that's not true. Hinduism is 7,000 years old.
yeah, but if you go to Little
Don't
Italy,
go
there's no
there.
Italians left there. And if you go to Chinatown, not a lot of Chinese people there. The ethnic identities in America last three generations, and by the fourth generation,
That's all
everybody
true.
everybody intermarries to everybody else, and
Right.
we become one mishmash of America.
Yeah, and on one level, that's really good because the things that should unite us are common beliefs.
Hmm.
Things that divide us are beliefs that are not common. All right? That was how I had a friendship with a priest,
Right.
with Tom Hartman. The things that we both agreed with. That was what linked us. The things we didn't agree with didn't it divided us, but it didn't make us antagonistic to each other.
So I want to say something about Israel, which is going to be very unpopular. So
Okay?
for those who are listening, please forgive me for this. But
I
since
forgive
the
you.
today's day 600, which is really a frightening number, and since the 600 days of hostages, 600 days of war, 600 days of vicious anti-Semitism around the world, even from people we thought were our friends. All of this has changed us. In some ways, it's an amazing thing that's happened. We've seen a surge of identification. We've seen people come back to the synagogue, come back to our community because they said, I never thought I was this Jewish. But what's going on now really found something inside of me. And I respect that. Don't get me wrong. I deeply respect that. And I welcome, embrace those people. And I try my very best to enrich that with something deeper than just a crisis mentality. But when people say to me, Israel is so important to me, I'm tempted, and forgive me for this, but I'm tempted to ask them a silly question. You read Hebrew?
Right. Have you ever visited?
Have you visited Israel? Do you read Hebrew? Do you read a Hebrew newspaper? Can you read Shai Agnon or Bialik's poetry? Right? Do you know who's on the bestseller list of Israeli novelists? Do you know who are the important columnists in Israeli newspapers? Do you know what Israelis eat for breakfast? Oh, I was there. I know. It's this big spread in the hotel. Yeah, that's what you eat for breakfast in Israel. That's what they eat. And I don't I'm not denigrating your love of Israel, God forbid. But I think it's time for us to grow up and to stop making Israel Disneyland and stop making Israel simply a symbol. It was a symbol when it was first created. It was a symbol after the Six-Day War. It was a symbol even after October 7th. But here I want to appeal to you, and I'm not judging, I'm appealing. Learn the real Israel. It's so much more beautiful than you can imagine. Learn its music, learn its language, learn its literature. Now everybody watch Shtisel on television and says, I know Israelis. I know what the ultra Orthodox look like. I got news for you. That's not exactly the ultra Orthodox. Fauda is not exactly Israelis.
Right.
But I'm appealing to that. If I say, for example, I love France, you would expect me to learn French and read French novels and eat French food and visit there. And if you love Israel, don't just love Israel as a symbol. Love Israel as it really is and go learn it. Learning Hebrew is not that hard. I'm really bad at languages. I could learn some. Reading an Israeli novel will open your eyes to a whole world of experience that's not ours. There's a whole culture now, which is Israeli culture. And Israeli culture is deeply Jewish and also deeply Mediterranean, deeply Middle Eastern, and has so much to offer. We did a series a couple of years ago here in our adult education program when we were still online about Israel, everything except the politics. We did art, music, television, theater, movies,
That's great.
um, food. We did this whole Israel except so if you take away all the politics and learn how Israelis live their lives, I'm telling you, you're going to discover something, an element of your Jewishness that you never even knew existed.
That's true. Let me add another caution, which since I'm retired, there's even less risk for me than for you. If your identity as an American Jew is based and if is not religious, you're ethnic Jew, and if that ethnicity is mainly based on Israel, and as you just said, Ed, you don't know that much about Israel. When Israel does things during the war in Gaza that you find incomprehensible, that you don't understand, even though you justify the war and the attempt to redeem the hostages from the brutal and animalistic Hamas. When Israel does something that is not in its own best interests, in your opinion, are you still capable of retaining your Jewish identity? If you've put all your eggs in the Israel basket, and Israel all of a sudden isn't the Israel of the Six-Day War, it isn't the Israel of the 1948 dancing with kova tumbles and dancing around Hava Nagila. No, what if it's a real country with real and difficult military and political decisions? And if you don't agree with some of those decisions, as Israelis, some Israelis also don't, what happens to your identity? If you live in Israel, nothing happens to your identity because you're living there. You're an Israeli. But what about American Jews? If our attachment to Israel was, as you say, only as an image or a kind of uh, talisman, an icon of our Jewish, a surrogate Judaism for us. Oh, we don't do anything but look at the Israelis. Look what if that's good, if that's what roots you in your Jewish identity, what protects you when Israel is no longer the darling of the international stage? What happens then?
Yeah, or what happens when it offends your own personal morality?
Correct.
Israelis are notorious for protesting their government,
Yes.
right? We here in America have a much narrower political spectrum. Here in America, if you stand up and say, I love Israel, but I'm very upset with what Israel's doing, you get smacked down as an anti-Semite because
Right.
there is such a threat of those who delegitimize Israel, and you're identified immediately with them, right? And that's a problem. And by the way, it's not entirely illegitimate to say, I understand your criticisms. Let's talk about those criticisms, but let's not talk about them in the language of the delegitimizers. Let's have
Right.
our own language. Again, David Hartman, who was Daniil's father, used to say there's a difference between the way your mother criticizes you and your mother-in-law criticizes you. Your mother-in-law is brutal, right? You were never the person who was good enough for my daughter, right? But your mother will say, I love you, Bubala, but this is what you did wrong. And if you embrace Israel like a mother and say, I love Israel and I want it to be a better state, and this is what it needs to be doing. This is what it needs to be. I think that's a legitimate quality. It's
I
okay
agree.
to be a critical Zionist, but you have to be a Zionist, not an anti-Zionist. And I think that's a distinction that's been lost in this last year of all of the vicious kind of delegitimization and criticism that's been going on.
Well, what I love most is your comment. You have to love the real Israel, not the fantasy Israel.
And you'll fall in love with it. I fell in love
Yes.
with it as soon as I learned enough Hebrew to to listen in on the insider conversation, and eat the foods that are Israeli foods and not the ones at the buffet at the hotel, but really, and to really listen to the music and enjoy this and find out who these people are. You're going to discover something that's even more beautiful than you thought. Well, Mark, it's Shavuos.
Yay.
The
Chag
customs of
Sameach.
Shavuos is we eat dairy. Go ahead. Ask me why we eat dairy.
Why do we eat dairy
I
on
have
Shabbat?
no idea whatsoever. I
Neither do
think
I.
I think the Blintz makers had a monopoly. So something dairy cheesecake is always acceptable. I think that's what the
Blintzes,
Lord gave.
blintzes.
Blintz's cheesecake. Um, and then, of course, we take time on Sunday night, Erev Shavuos, to learn. So if you confine yourself to a Tikkun Leil Shavuos, a celebration of Jewish learning, I heartily recommend that you do that. If you can't, this is a good time to pick up a Jewish book. Pick up a Jewish book and spend the evening learning a little Torah, learning a little Judaism. Mark, what Jewish book would you recommend to people this year?
Oh, my favorite is the Guide of the Perplexed by Maimonides.
Yeah, but it's impossible to read.
I
What,
know,
what
but
would you read
it's
about it?
worthy. It's
Yeah,
worthy. The best introduction is Milton Steinberg's Protestant, Catholic, and Jew. That's a good one.
Herberg. That's Will Herberg,
Will Herbert's that word.
Protestant Catholic. Milton Steinberg's book is called Basic Judaism, which is an
This I
introduction
believe,
book. That's a good one. The
right?
Anatomy of a Faith by Milton Steinberg is also a fabulous book. He was a
Right.
great, great writer and a great thinker. Right.
There's an introduction to Judaism, sort of encyclopedia, one volume by Joseph Telushkin,
Yeah.
Jewish wisdom and
Almost any of Telushkin's books are
Jewish
encyclopedic. They're really
literacy.
right.
That I recommend that highly. And just basically, I would read personally.
Mhm.
What I'm going to do, I have them all set up on my reading table, is the poems of Leah Goldberg,
Oh, beautiful.
one of the great Hebrew poets.
Leah Goldberg's poetry. The professor, Hebrew professor Robert Alter in Berkeley, has a beautiful translation of Yehuda Amichai's poetry.
Oh,
It's available and accessible. Um, I've been reading my dear friend, our teacher, Yitz Greenberg's magnum opus. It's a very huge book. It's called The Triumph of Life, and it's his life work explaining to us what it is that modern Judaism can be. Of course, the great book, if you have just a little bit of time, Abraham Joshua Heschel's The Sabbath is a beautiful treatment of Shabbat, but it's an opening to the whole enterprise of Jewish life. And if you want something more substantial than Abraham Heschel's God in Search of Man is a beautiful and powerful book. I would recommend for those who have little kids, Rabbi Gelman's Does God Have a Big Toe? It's a beautiful set of midrashim of stories, beautiful, beautiful pointed stories that indicate Jewish faith. And I recommend my dear friend Rabbi
lovely.
Mark's wonderful, wonderful book. So I wish everybody a wonderful Shavuos. Take a big slice of cheesecake, and if your cardiologist says no, say no, it's good for my Jewish heart. Mark, take care.
Chag Sameach, my friend.